hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. I am excited today to be here at Cartel Coffee, one of my favorite spots. I was just at the Scottsdale location, the Old Town location recently, but I haven't been here in a couple years. And last time I was here, this whole area back here was seating, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, yep.
When did that transition happen?
Well,
Wah, wah, COVID.
Okay, yeah.
There was a point where actually none of this was seating, and there was a table at the front door with plexiglass in front of it, and it was like you could get served through a little slit that was like 8 inches tall and 12 inches wide.
Okay.
And, there was that minute. And now, since we've kind of grown actually in the last couple years, from a production standpoint, we actually needed the space to house our roastery.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of one of the COVID was the start to that, but when we realized we weren't using it as seating and we needed the extra square footage, it was only natural to sort of maintain that. And we're actually in process of putting in a new coffee roastery, a much larger facility, 12,000 square feet total, just down the street towards Phoenix, but still in Tempe on University in the 143 area.
Nice. Well, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I didn't even have you both introduce yourself. So before we get into the long story and the many awesome things you guys have going on, if you would, please just introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Silberschlag.
Hello, my name is Jason Silberschlag, and we are the co-founders of
Cartel Roasting Co.
And so how long has Cartel been roasting coffee for?
Well, this very space that we're sitting is the first lease we've signed, and it was September of 2007.
Okay. Wow.
We opened for retail business January of 2008.
Mm-hmm. So we're in our 15th year. Finished 14 in our 15th.
Well, congratulations on that. That's
Thanks.
a big year.
I would say so, I think.
With anniversaries, it can be which years are big years, but really all of them are big years, right? Especially when it's something like running a business, every year that it stays around.
Post-COVID.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, now
Everything
the years
feels like
are
a win.
less impressive than that we're still here. That
still
feels
here.
more impressive.
Like Joaquin Phoenix.
And getting to year 5, what felt like a really big deal in the restaurant beverage industry, especially. You're always warned about those first couple of years.
Well, and especially around that time when, it was a tumultuous economic time to be operating and opening a business in. Walk me a little bit through, even before that, what got you guys into coffee and kind of led to Cartel becoming a thing?
Yeah, I'll start with that since Amy likes to generously give too many details of my coffee history, which did start at Starbucks and with lots of caramel sauce.
Okay. I feel like many people's coffee journeys do that, at least these days, right?
That butter caramel they had? They'd get like an inch and a half at the bottom, swirl it in with the espresso.
I know the caramel from the caramel macchiato when I was 14 years old, and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah. So the stuff that they drizzle on top, I used to get that in the bottom, and then they'd mix the espresso with that and then add the milk. I mean, it was basically a milkshake.
I think they were onto something with the sauce being so thick, because iconically people would swirl the ice, and it was like you knew half a block away if someone had a Starbucks drink.
Genius. It was
amazing.
so genius,
Because of the sound of the ice
you
swirling
hear
around.
the ice jingling in the plastic cup, right?
And so I, on the other hand, did not used to drink coffee at all, but my roommate, my best friend, they all, I felt left out because I didn't have the jingling cup to swirl.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
And so what was funny is
Back to starting a business in...
I got into coffee, and I was like, hey, coffee's good. And she's like, I don't think so. I was like, well, we'll see. And I ended up going to Guatemala and had this really amazing coffee experience. I think we'd already gotten the espresso machine at home by that time. So she was trained to drink some lattes, but she wasn't a black coffee drinker. She wasn't drinking cappuccinos or espresso. But she really loved sort of the idea of the craft of it. And so I went to Guatemala, spent about 10 days there with actually my friend who was the one who introduced me to coffee at Starbucks.
Okay.
And we just had the most remarkable, most amazing, eye-opening trip about coffee and about what it was and what it could be, and all of the people that connected all the dots from point A to point B completely across the world. And I think I just got really fascinated with the complexity yet simplicity of the product, right? I mean, so many things can go wrong in the supply chain, from when the trees are planted to they don't really produce a full crop till they're 5 years grown.
Wow.
And even then, if you chose the wrong variety for your wrong location, it's not going to work. I mean, there's just so many levels of complexity that exist in altitude and weather and all of these things just before they even leave the country. Not to mention by the time we get them and what we could do to mess them up. It's a really complicated process. And I think I really just appreciated that sort of complexity. And so the irony is we've both kind of gone down our coffee journeys now where we wake up and drink black coffee pretty much every day, and that's just how we do it. Our 12-year-old son is a black coffee fanatic.
Oh, yeah?
He loves his coffee every morning before he goes to 6th grade.
We have to ration him.
Yeah.
We do. We have to
have this much.
Yeah.
we want to keep him from the not growing tall enough or whatever.
Is he typically a high energy young kid?
Not necessarily.
No.
It's pretty average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if he was, then you might be opening up a can of worms there where he's bouncing
Exactly.
off the walls and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with this trip to Guatemala, it sounds like a lot of that trip was centered around coffee. Was that the plan for the trip, or did it just kind of develop that way?
100%. Yeah, we went with about 10 other coffee people and a grower that is the third generation coffee grower.
Okay.
Who lived in Bellingham, Washington. But his family's from Guatemala. His dad was sort of in between the business and outside of the business, and then he kind of dove fully back in as the grandson into running the farm and then dealing with the exporting and importing into the United States and then sales in the United States here. So he took us down there with the full intent of showing us seed to cup what's going on the other side of the globe, if you will, when we talk about coffee.
Well, and you mentioned, how so many things can go wrong. It's simple in a way, but it's also very complex in another way. And I got to say, it makes me feel like a villain thinking about all the complex coffee work that went on to bring bags of coffee into my house, and then I destroy it every time I try and make a pour over in my Chemex. I haven't quite got the craft yet. That's why I come to places like this.
Nice. Awesome. I appreciate that. You want to talk about that?
Well, I was just going to add that from my perspective, I didn't used to drink coffee, but I've always really liked people. So we met as part of a community in college, and we've always thrived in groups and just collaborating and having fun. And so part of the idea was, how can we get paid to hang out with people?
Sure.
I had left a job. Amy was at home with 3 foster boys at the time that were with us, young ones.
Yeah, so on this trip, part of what we were trying to decide business-wise was, should we be a coffee shop, which is more people and community-oriented, or should we roast coffee? The business advice we had kind of been given up to that point was, you have to pick one or the other. Retail and wholesale are two totally different models.
Everyone said, don't do both. It's too hard.
And so we were sorting that out. He goes on this trip and just had such like a real visceral connection and experience with the things he mentioned, and just
so you weren't on the trip to Guatemala?
I was not on the trip.
Someone had to stay with those foster boys.
I was at home with the grandmas for backup, because
Luckily.
they were 3 high energy small children.
Okay.
And
I had the easy part of that week for sure.
So if I'm understanding the situation correctly, you were mulling over opening it as a business before the Guatemala trip.
Correct. We were toying with the idea of roasting, but didn't know anything about it. I had no experience in roasting. Obviously, Amy didn't either. We did have some experience in coffee and the idea of community and cafes. That was something we really understood well. But going from the idea of being a cafe to roasting and then being a cafe was like very different. And
Sure.
I would say, though, I think the connection to the people on the other side of the bean, if you will.
Meaning the producers.
Yes,
growers,
the producers, growers,
sorters.
and even some of the governmental agencies that support those growers. I mean, there's a lot. It's not just the producers. There are a lot of other people at the other end of the spectrum that are really working hard, because a lot of these countries that sell coffee it's their largest gross export. So there are governmental agencies that are set up to help the farmers be successful, because when they're successful, their economy is successful.
Yeah.
So the growers are the hugest part of it, but there's a lot of other people there that do a lot of great work that rarely get mentioned. So I just want to give a shout out to all those people too.
Well, and we were talking before we started recording about how ever since I was a kid, I loved business in general. And that's one of the things that I love about business is you say working hard. It's not just the people that are in the fields, putting in some of the hardest days you can put in, but there's so many other components, government agencies, people like you, importers, so many things that go on. And it really is incredible if you think about it and sit here and really ponder it. When you look at a cup of coffee like this, it's incredible that it even made it here.
Yeah, exactly. And for such a cheap price, right? At the end of the day. I mean, I know
when
it's $7,
you think of how many hands have touched
it's absolutely
here. It's amazing.
It is.
So when he was on that trip, it was life-changing, and it was like, how could we not participate in this process?
Mm-hmm.
How could we not choose who we, which coffees we bring in or who we work with, and those kind of things. So it was like that revelation. And then on the flight home, he happened to meet someone who had already been successful in the Portland, Oregon coffee scene, and they struck up a conversation. And he kind of, Jason said, should I roast or do a cafe?
Which should I do?
Which should I do?
What should I do first? I think was the right question.
Yeah.
And what was his response?
And he said, I did both.
Oh, really?
And it was like...
That was literally all I needed. I was like, well, if you can do it, I can do it.
It was like the 4-minute mile getting broken. Like, once it was broken,
yeah, totally.
10 people broke it right after that. Like, so...
That was the beginning of that journey. And so I think when I got back, the first thing we did was look for a roaster that was cheap enough that we could start roasting. So we found a great deal, brought it over on a trailer from San Diego, and I think the rest was history at that point. We kind of played around with it. I think we drank the second batch of coffee we roasted on there. So surprisingly enough, with the little knowledge that I had at that point, I spent a week with a friend in Alabama who's a roaster, helped him kind of like roast for a week, and he taught me everything he knew for that week. And we basically just came back and started doing it here, and it kind of worked, and we figured it out every day. We made it a little bit better and a little bit better, but it was that one moment where I was like, second batch of coffee that we were drinking it. I remember I get chills still kind of thinking about it. We gave it out to our family and friends for Christmas that year. It was just a really cool feeling.
Well, so I want to take a small step back. When you came home from this trip and you just had one of those life-changing experiences, did that translate to you? Were you already kind of there and you knew you wanted to go in that direction? Or did you soak up his energy and you're like, let's make this happen?
Well...
Tell the truth. Tell the truth. It's usually me dragging her my entire life.
No, but I do feel like, so I'm the more conservative one. He's the bigger risk taker. Mm-hmm. But it felt feasible and like something we wanted to pursue before he went. Mm-hmm. But I think we just maybe didn't know how much it would mean, or and we also just we didn't know we'd be here 14 years later and have 11 stores and
were
that
young,
kind of thing either. So
we were young and dumb, right? We just didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah, you mentioned the tumultuous economy. We had no idea. Like, we didn't watch the news. We didn't,
You were too busy taking trips to Guatemala.
We knew there was a real estate dump. Actually, it was funny because we opened in January of 2008. So I don't think there was any question as to whether that was happening or not. But what I think what we kind of learned by accident, or luckily I should say, is, we priced our coffee really inexpensively, and it was really pretty good compared to other coffee you could get around here. And I think we just created a few really loyal customers locally that were like, this place is so weird and cool. And, we were in this little tunnel. It was just, there was a wall here and a wall there, and it was just this. So the only daylight we had beyond that front window right there was that door when it was open.
Okay.
And I remember sitting back here, and I'd be doing welding projects or spray painting T-shirts for sale until a customer came in, and I'd have paint all over my hands or whatever, and I'd be making, coffee drinks, and they were just like, this is so strange.
Yeah, I definitely think early on people were drawn to like just the energy and excitement. And then you have to think about specialty coffee in Arizona 15 years ago. It was weird that we only had 8 ounces or 16 ounces of coffee. It was weird that we just had chocolate or vanilla. We didn't have the whipped cream and caramel and mint, and we didn't have a blender. We didn't have cinnamon to sprinkle on top. So part of what we really were doing was educating people that the coffee is so amazing. Would you consider tasting it for what it is without covering it up, if you will?
Absolutely.
Do you remember when we didn't have ice? We actually only served hot drinks. Yeah. And one day someone came in. Someone's told me this story like I've told it before.
Or Pinar.
They came in and said, "Oh, can I have a iced latte?" And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah, and she was from the Bay Area.
I was like,
so she knew
"Yeah, just give me a minute. I'll be right back." And I ran over to Circle K and bought a bag of ice across the street. Awesome. Came back and made my first iced latte.
That's awesome. Well, and those are the stories that I really love, because you mentioned, you love people. And that's kind of like one of the coolest things for me about business as well, as we touched on earlier, how many people can be involved in one product. But when it comes down to it, without people, obviously, a business doesn't operate. So it's moments like that for entrepreneurs that I think are so fun to look back on, because, with everything that you guys have going on now, multiple locations in multiple states, and to think about running and grabbing a bag of ice or spray painting shirts while you're making coffee, it's a pretty surreal thing to look back on, I would think.
Yeah, it was cheaper than screen printing, because I could make one at a time, right? So we had these stencils that we cut out and used as many times as we could. I think we usually got about 10 shirts out of them, and I think at that time every shirt I made was different. I just did a bunch of random stuff, and
I was gonna say it almost makes them one of a kind, right?
Yeah, I remember the day my original Cartel T-shirt died, and it was just so sad. It was like end of an era.
Yeah. So jumping back into, your early days, you guys get open, as you were saying, it was a fraction of the space that it's consuming now, just for this location. Of course, over the years, you guys built up many more locations, but once you got open and that ball was kind of rolling, did people receive it really nicely? Was it kind of a struggle to educate people, being that, people were used to caramel macchiatos like myself?
Well, I think that we were so fortunate to find this location. We didn't even realize that all the businesses in this complex are all locally owned, owner-operator businesses on the edge of this neighborhood, where people come here on purpose because they value that. There's a lot of open-minded people who were intrigued and curious and kind of like, where did you guys come from? And because it was a warehouse, there was a little bit of that like under promise, over deliver. And I really do think we had just really genuine, authentic, slow, connective experiences that kind of compounded, and people would bring their friends. And I really feel like the community grew with us as we grew, and they grew us, and and it was really cool. And then
it was actually just, when you say cool, I think magical, just because it was one of the funnest and most interesting times I think I've ever experienced in my life. Just those early days of like hanging out with neighborhood people, and they were all so interesting and fun and just cool, just really cared about stuff. And I mean, it's shaped, I think, who we are a lot, actually, as individuals now.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're writing up a business plan, I bet in your sales strategy you're not saying, we want to spend a lot of time creating really in-depth relationships with people. But I'm sure it's something that you kind of intuitively understood as you were mulling over the roastery versus cafe model. So once that starts happening, you mentioned that it was one of the most interesting periods of time in your life. What does that feel like? Are there some memories that jump out at you that you kind of realize, everything that we wanted to manifest here is beginning to come true?
Well, one of the stories I love to tell, because I think it's part of who we are today too, is so Jason he thinks by doing, and he thinks, and then he does, and then he understands, and then he iterates, and then he changes course or modifies or whatever. So when we almost were entirely complete with the build out here, waiting for our final stamp of approval, time to go. City inspector came out and said, your roaster has a chimney that goes up, out, through the roof. You can't have that metal circle chimney sticking out of the roof. You need to build a metal fence around it.
It has to have a screen. It had to be screened.
So essentially, so you can't see it.
Oh, okay.
So,
cover this big metal thing with a big metal thing.
Cover this small metal thing with a big metal thing. Yeah.
And we are already like bootstrapping down to our last dime, and it felt emotionally like this huge
defeating.
setback.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls someone, gets a quote, and it is literally that very roaster that you just glanced at. The quote came back.
The screen's still up there, by the way, that I built.
$600, let's say. So he's in Home Depot, and he's like, I saw a welder in there for $475. I can get that. And I saw this, there's always metal at the scrapyard. No one's ever going to see it. I'll just build the thing. Because that's how his brain works.
Sure.
There's a problem. I'm just going to do something and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no idea that the next week, after operating into space and whatever, he's like, it'd be really helpful if I had a desk
a work
that was
table
on
desk,
wheels that could be slanted when I need to write on it and flat when I need to bag coffee. So he built a custom desk because he had some extra metal, and now he had this welder. And then when we first started, we were a mobile food certified cart that was parked in front of the roastery. And as people came in, we were kind of leaning into the grab a bag of coffee and take it home with you. But people were like, what? Have you ever considered putting any tables in here? And we thought, oh, that's a good idea. So he welded our tables. So if you look around, you'll notice there are custom welded pieces of furniture, our tables, the bar, and a lot of our production
retail areas. Yeah.
You make it sound so easy. I want to go buy a welder myself.
It
and
is.
start doing it.
My friend calls it a hot glue gun for metal.
Really?
It's really what it is.
You're tempting me too much right
just
now.
Just don't build any buildings right out of the gate.
Sure.
Start with something that's not going to kill anybody, and then, go from there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I see how sturdy some of the tables are over here. If somebody gets in a precarious position, one of those has the potential to kill someone. Not that yours would. I don't mean to make it sound like you have shoddy work, but
no, but they are strong and maybe a little over engineered.
Overbuilt, yeah.
He's a maximizer, so
okay.
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
So when you start making these, what seem like little adjustments, but end up being huge adjustments of, beginning to build it out as more of a retail space that people can hang out and enjoy it, how does the business continue to evolve over those early years?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think we started out, and it was us. She was at home with the 3 foster boys, and I was here. We were like 8 to 4 or whatever. And I was roasting coffee and baristaing, so somebody came in and was like, this is really cool. I want to learn how to make coffee like this. And he said, are you hiring by chance? And I was like, well, no, we don't have any money to pay anybody. Like, we can't hire anybody. And he goes, well, what if you just taught me and I'll work for tips and you just teach me what you know? And I was like, all right, that seems fair.
That's a very good deal for
now
you.
You're like,
sure.
I can run and deliver a wholesale order. I can go get more milk at the store. I can do whatever. I can actually start to run a little bit of a business and
run to Circle K for some ice.
Yeah, exactly. Around the same time, a gal in our neighborhood kind of said the same thing, but she had a little girl also. So she was sort of like stuck at home while her husband was working with the baby. And Amy's was like, hey, we'll watch your baby and you can go and work for a couple hours just to, do your thing, keep the tips and come home. And she was like, yeah, I would love that. So our first 2 baristas were basically working for free. And the guy that happened to start working for us, not the one with the baby, but his one little, so we had the baby sitting for the gal, and for him, he made chocolates. Like he would do chocolates and treats and stuff at home, and then he'd bring them in and sell them, because the only food we were selling at the time was like Cheez-Its in bags from Costco.
Which I don't know if that's the best pair for a cup of coffee.
It wasn't, but we love Cheez-Its, so we're like, we have to sell these. They're so good. I think we had like a sparkling water and Cheez-Its, and that was like our retail section besides a bag of coffee. And so he would come in the afternoons, and he would make these chocolates and sell them, and anything that he sold he got to keep. And it was just kind of like this really fun sort of like almost barter type culture where, you know, we gave them an outlet for whatever they were doing, and we got to like step away from the business for an hour or two to get other stuff done, and it was really cool. So
to answer your first question, how it grew was, as the volume increased, we were able to actually start paying employees, and
took about 4 months. We actually hired, I use my quote fingers here, about 4 more people who were basically in the same boat, who were working for free in order to learn the craft. And that lasted, a month or two. And then we were like, hey, we can actually start paying everybody. And they were like, whoa, they were excited, and we were excited, and it felt like a huge milestone. And now we have payroll taxes and all this stuff. So we really had this trial by fire of going from being little 1-person, 2-person operation, and it really was 1 person, even though we were both working on it, because we couldn't both work on it at the same time. It was just one of us at all times, and so it's this 1-person operation into 4 employees, and that was so weird. I remember taking a vacation that summer thinking, what if something goes wrong? But I think we left for a whole week in our first 6 months of business ownership, which seems insane when I think about it now. And then another year went by, and another year, and pretty soon
we grew a lot in managing people, and in the sense that we would, in our minds, we're like, oh, we're going to start doing this, and we would just start doing it. But then when that next person would show up for a shift, they're like, where did this come from? What do you mean we're doing this?
Yeah.
And we thought, well, I guess we should like give them some advance notice and have employee meetings and write down some of these procedures, and it just all, we did it as it came. Situations would happen, and we'd figure them out, and then we'd document them, so we'd be more prepared for the next time.
It's funny when I look back, because I think there were times when they all gave us a lot of grace, and there were other times when they didn't. and so we were very thankful for both of those situations, because it's always a growing opportunity, right? So there were some hard moments. There were some really fun ones too.
Well, that's there's so many different things that are required to be a good business owner, right? And when you're not only the owner of the business, but you're also working in it every single day and trying to work on it, free up your time so you can build systems and processes that are going to allow you to scale. Things can fall through the cracks, right? So to be able to have a team that you can communicate with and that shares a value set of, not only learning the craft and doing a great job of it, but also understanding your guys' perspective of, this isn't just something we can pay you a bunch of money and teach you and all this, kind of bootstrapping it until you hit the point where you can give back to them, and creating that network of employees and customers as well. That's something that, you can't really ever create in a large corporation, right? It almost has to be brought out of nothing, which is kind of the journey of entrepreneurship, right? Is building something out of nothing.
Well, and just to toot our horn a little bit, we went from literally day one of not paying our employees to being at a point now where everybody in our company is actually paid a livable wage according to the MIT standard for a livable wage, which actually it's a lot more than you'd think. It's somewhere in the like $18 range. And so we're really, really proud of that, because I think probably not a lot of companies are able to say that. And so that's a really huge achievement for us to be able to do that and actually pay. There's a different standard. There's single, and then like a married with kids sort of livable wage, and it's a little higher even for those. And we still hit that second standard for about 50% of our employees, and definitely all of our full-time employees. So it's a really exciting place to be as a business owner for us today, to be able to go from that to something that feels like such an achievement.
Well, I feel like right now, I'm not an MIT professor or researcher, but I feel like lately, from anecdotal evidence, there's been a major shift towards more responsible business ownership. And I feel like that's one of those things where for the longest time people didn't realize how much of a problem it was, and more recently some of those issues have come to light and become more of a talking point and kind of a social argument almost that's taking place, right, between people that are more on your end of the spectrum and people that are more corporate end of the spectrum, these large corporations that are trying to maximize dollars for investors. And I think there's certain aspects of both types of management that are required, but when you see a place like this and hear stories like that, it's like, how could you not want to come here and buy a coffee every single day and not mess it up in your Chemex at home? Pay a little extra and support an entire crew of people that are part of your community. And I think that's something that I see here and get from talking with you guys, but I see it throughout Arizona. And I think that's something that is not necessarily unique to Arizona, but it's one of the things that makes the industry very special here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was wondering, do you want to share a little bit about what actually our philosophy is regarding the sort of like ideal customer? You're giving me the look like I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure what
okay, that's funny. It was totally
say.
Something that when you said, why not support the staff? It's like, so we sort of developed this idea that what we really love, the ideal customer, is to come in, spend some quality time a couple times a week, and take a bag of coffee home with you, because we do want to be the educators. We do want to share our knowledge about coffee. We want you to feel empowered to be able to create great coffee, because when you do it at home, it means that everyone that comes to your house that enjoys that cup of coffee is going to be blown away by it too. And it's honestly a great opportunity to share the story of that seed to cup, all that hard work that happens on the other end, and frankly, the hard work that happens here too, with our staff. So, our ideal customer, because I think it's somewhat financially irresponsible to be able to buy coffee at a coffee shop every day. I mean, I run the company, and I couldn't financially do that if I didn't get free coffee.
Are you calling me financially irresponsible?
I think you're financially, I think you're just more flush than everyone might know.
Maybe. No, okay.
No, but, just that idea of contributing to your community, but being able to do it for yourself is really one of our values. One of our core values actually is be better today than yesterday. So I think about that every morning when I make coffee. I'm either thinking, what can I do better? Or I'm saying, you could do that better. Why are you being so lazy? Or why are you being so frustrating? Why aren't you taking the time to do this right? So it's at least I know it when I'm slacking off.
Well, and that's something that maybe more so in your early days when you guys were really bootstrapping it, but that's why a lot of businesses go under in their first few years, is because it requires so much of you on a personal level, on a financial level, on just pushing your body to the limit sometimes to be able to work long hours when you're exhausted, and then somebody asks for an iced latte and you have to run a quarter mile as fast as you ever have before with a bag of ice in tow.
In the middle of the summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is sort of off topic, but I've just been reflecting on those early days compared to today, and even compared to the last 2 years of uncertainty. I think it's been an opportunity to really identify why we do what we do, because we started doing it, we have fun doing it, we have a great team of people alongside of us doing it, and I think naturally when you're involved in something, your values and your character kind of drive you to do things the way you do them, which we like to believe we do things with integrity and respect, and we are really quality focused. But it really gave like the title of leading a business, or the vision for the business and the strategy for what we're doing next, so much more meaning when you think about we have an opportunity to use our business for good and to give back to our community just by how we choose to treat our employees, or just by choosing to build appropriate cost of living increases into our growth plan. And anything from sourcing ingredients at a, obviously coffee's not grown in Arizona, but things like in our bakery, using as much local ingredients as we can, and choosing how we spend our dollars as a company, and the relationships that we're cultivating with our vendors, if those can be in our communities and know that, that we are kind of collaborating and doing things for good together, it's so encouraging. And it really, as hard as it's been reinvigorating to think about the why and share that
Absolutely.
with our team, and make that the reason that we move forward.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because I bet if I looked at your guys' list of core values, it would apply far beyond just coffee in general, right? Do better every single day. That is like, if you can live life with that mantra being a central value of who you are, you're going to set yourself up for success, and not just financial success, but success as a person. And, I'm not super religious myself, but as a spiritual being, right? Growing in this world, being able to deal with adversity. And that's one of the reasons why I personally love business so much, and doing podcasts like this is because, it's awesome to talk about technical coffee roasting. It's awesome to hear about your trips, but nothing makes me want to shed tears more than hearing, the development of people through business, and, to hear what you were doing to help your staff, where you're watching their children so they can come and earn a living while also loving what they do and benefiting you guys. I mean, what is more awesome than building a system like that out in this world that can be so unforgiving sometimes?
Yeah, agreed. And I just to add on to one of the things that you just reminded me of, I'm in the middle of a couple of books by a gentleman named Edward Papke, and his definition of business is actually it's this. Well, actually, I should start here. If you think about the world the way it is, and then you think about the world the way you want it to be, that arrow going from where it is to where you want it to be is business. It's the
Absolutely.
art of business. And so when we talk about, having a sustainable future for our kids to grow up in, we look at our business and we say, this is an opportunity for us to help create that sustainable future, whether that's through, fair wages for men, women, black, white, yellow, brown, red, every color, every type, every ethnicity, every religion, every race, all of those things. When we talk about, having a world that they can actually still enjoy, that is naturally preserved, at least to some extent, and not ruined. When we talk about those things, that's where we are and where we want it to be. And really connecting that dot through those two dots through this enterprise,
Well, and we've gotten very, not necessarily out there, but very abstract with this conversation. So to bring it full circle and back into the coffee side of things, if you think about the way that humanity has changed since coffee was first cultivated, many of the issues that we're dealing with now didn't even exist back then. So to have come so far that we've created new issues, solved those, created new issues, solved them, and now we're in a time where it's almost, I kind of think of it of a lens of, conscious consumption. That's what you guys are doing, is you're putting something in a cup, on a plate, that people can enjoy and, enrich their personal lives, but also be enriching the lives of several people around them that they will never meet ever. People down in Guatemala that are manufacturing these products that will maybe never even come to the United States, yet so many people here in Arizona are benefiting from that. And it just creates this positive feedback loop that I think, more and more people are recognizing, especially throughout the pandemic, of realizing, we need to go support these small local businesses, because if not, then I might have to go to Starbucks and start getting, my caramel drenched coffee, because places like Cartel, which did survive, maybe wouldn't have without the support of local communities.
For sure.
So as you guys, kind of get your feet under you, you get out of the bootstrapping phase and really into the focusing on growth phase. Kind of walk me through that, what that looks like, and, adding locations and making that transition to growing.
Yeah. I can tell you one thing, there were more mistakes than not. That's definitely one way to look at it.
Yes. I think early on we said yes to a lot of opportunities, and some of them were really great and some of them took longer to be really great. But what I loved about our growth is, so one of the things I think is so unique about Jason is he has the ability to use his right side and left side of his brain. So every new opportunity that would come, the first part of it was like this physical retail space. And that same ingenuity and innovation he applied to building this space out. And what do we have that I can put to use? What neighborhood are we in? How can we involve, recycle, upcycle, reuse? So each of the build outs of the 11 stores, well, there's 2 of them that outside contractors helped with, but the rest of them he really designed and then also did most of the build out. And it allows him to do that kind of more artsy, designy part, but also like the efficiencies of movement behind the bar and applying things that we've learned from doing business before, or the type of interactions we want our baristas to have with the community. So we're able to kind of learn and modify and apply and try things and learn from them. And so that part of it was really fun. There was a very specific point in time, and it wasn't until several years in where we kind of paused what you would see as growth on the outside, and we really did some intense work on our infrastructure.
Became introspective as a business, if you will.
Yeah, and what was really cool about that was being able to be really clear with our team about the roles that exist in our company and how to be successful in those roles, and then have systems for movement within the company and growth and development and training and accountability and coaching. And it was a totally different kind of work, but I think it's work that has supported each of us as individual staff within the company, and also made it more clear where we're going and made us a more cohesive unit. So
we had a COO that we brought in from the outside that had a lot of like very structured sort of understandings of how business worked, and had never run a small business, but also like knew how to run a small business in ways that none of us really did. She came
maybe
in
bringing in some of the more, no, I don't want to say corporate in a bad way, but some of the more large
exactly
scale.
The perfect way to say it is corporate. Yeah, for better or worse. I mean, it was good and bad, right? But it created structure and organization that we'd never had before. And then she decided to move on. We had some partners that decided to move on. And then Amy and I came back actually to start operating the business again. We were kind of more like, during that time period, we're intended to be more
like on the board,
visionary, strategy, but not day-to-day operations. And then
more high-level activities.
Yeah, much more high level. Then we came back after she moved on and said, okay, we're coming back. And we realized the benefit that the company had seen from the structure. Didn't love the company culture necessarily, but saw the benefit of the structure. And we said, okay, we need some structure. We need something that's going to allow us, who are very different from that person, to continue to operate the business with this structure. So we actually started following an entrepreneurial operating system based on the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
It's on my reading list. Now it just moved to the top.
The book is super boring, but very informative.
Love the book.
Like I told you before we started, that is like right up my alley.
So we started following it. We made sure that we didn't break any of the rules, and we started getting some structure and some momentum, and we had core values, and we had a leadership team. It was completely wrong leadership team, but we had one. And then we just figured it out, and we iterated and did it again. And we said, okay, what if we tweak this a little? What if we tweak this? And we got into a really good place, and we're like, this is starting to work. We're 2 years in. It's totally making sense. And then boom, pandemic. And we had 2 key people on our team during that both said, hey, I'm out. I'm not doing what I want to do, or I like this, but I don't.
Yeah, they use it as opportunities to reflect on their much bigger picture of their lives, and kind of make the change that was inevitably coming, but it kind of shortened the timeline.
Yeah. One was to move back home and be closer to their family, and the other was to do something completely different outside of coffee. And it's been awesome actually seeing both of them now, because they seem even so much more happier now than they were when they were at Cartel.
Nice.
But I think we all went through this phase during the pandemic where it's sort of, we were, what's the phrase, where you're like, you heat up and you cool down, and you heat up and you cool down, where you become really strong. Tempering.
Okay,
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So we were all tempered through that, and now we've come out of that with a leadership team in place today that I do believe is the absolute right team for the right time, and honestly, completely different from what I would have envisioned 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's just so fascinating to see where we ended up from where we were, sort of by accident a little bit. I mean, it's not
sort
completely.
Of by accident,
we built
but
this
I
structure,
think,
yeah.
I think what the guiding principle through all the chaos was to just do the next right thing, because there were so many unknowns, and every day there was new information. Oftentimes we'd spend an afternoon deciding on a plan for tomorrow, and by the time you wake up, the plan's irrelevant because new information.
New information comes up,
but
or whatever.
Just promising. I mean, we were very open and honest with our team, with our customers. Like, we are guaranteed not going to get it right, but we're not going anywhere, and we're going to keep showing up, and we're going to keep doing the right next right thing.
Sure.
And we're doing our best.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's something that can get lost in business, right? Is it can become something that feels like a machine running on its own, but ultimately it completely relies on people, right? If you take all the people out of a business, it ceases to exist. And so, when you look back at the early days when it was you two were basically the business itself, you don't necessarily need a sheet that lists your core values, because it's intuitive to you, right? That's why you're doing what you're doing.
In our, yes.
But once you have a team of other people that come from all different perspectives and backgrounds and whatnot, that isn't necessarily as intuitive for them as it is for you, probably somewhat, because that's why they're drawn to your guys' business. But, as you grow, those things become more and more necessary. And so when you come into the pandemic, things start shifting around a lot. What is that like for you guys to kind of wrap your head around? Is it, was it hard to see what is, in a way, your guys' baby shift around and be modified? Was that difficult, or was it something that you guys really embraced and took as an opportunity?
And both.
And both, yeah, right?
It's funny because I feel like today, some of the things that have changed, we're almost like, okay, when did we start doing that? What was the reason? Do we still think that's the best way now that we're in a different place than a year ago when that decision was made? So we're almost just catching up to get a breath to say, are we still doing the best things in all these different areas? So it is funny to think about what did change, why it changed, how we adapted, if it was something we want to keep around or something let go. I mean, I think one of the coolest things that came out of one of the coolest changes we had was offering bulk coffee. So we used to only offer it in 12-ounce bags. And so now you can get 2 and 5-pound bags. So depending on how you drink coffee or how many people are in your home. But also an idea came up through the staff to start, since the online ordering increased so much and we were doing bulk, to start a give back blend. So we've been able to identify and work with different community organizations. Like we just were with Habitat for Humanity for a quarter.
Okay.
So it's like 10% of the proceeds of this blend of coffee go to Habitat for Humanity. And then we were able to go as a team and do a volunteer day with them as well. So kind of making what we do and how it serves the community, like having more than just one connection point on that.
Sure.
So that was something that was really cool. And then there were, I think, some unexpected changes also that we're evaluating. And then there are some things, we just had a really big change where we went to one size beverage as a result of kind of the environment.
Supply chain issues.
Supply chain, inflammation, the
interest. Or not. You said inflammation. I said interest. What we meant was...
Don't listen to us for business advice is what we meant.
Inflation.
There we go. Inflation is really just inflammation of value, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking a little bit more abstract than the true word.
Yes.
So, I mean, that alone, right? Inflation it's destroying a lot of businesses. Other ones are kind of rolling with the punches and figuring it out. But it seems like almost every business on planet Earth is being hit hard by inflation right now after staffing issues and other things.
Yeah, we've seen price changes 3 or 4 times a year on some of our suppliers, doubling the cost. I like to give this example because it's simple. Home Depot, the cost of plywood is double what it was a year ago. Our refrigeration manufacturer, True Refrigeration, they sent out 3 price increases in the last less than 12 months. It's crazy, and so and the increases that we're seeing from these vendors is 25-30% sometimes at a time. So that you get to this point where the plywood was $30, now it's $60 literally, and we're kind of internally torn up about having to raise our prices 10%. Thinking, how could we do this? How can we do this to the community, to the people that are loyal to us? And it's one of those things that we also, how can we not do it and survive? It's literally that dire. So it's really, really uncomfortable and really hard. And I promise you, anyone out there listening, if you've experienced a price increase anywhere, just remember it was not done flippantly. It's very much probably the owners of those businesses are literally toiling over it even after it's been done. It's crazy how hard it is to do stuff like that.
Absolutely. Well, and it's something too, like you said, there's not really a choice, right? And so it's interesting to see how a lot of smaller businesses really do toil over it so much, and that just goes to show how much you and other businesses like you care about your customers, right? Because taking a 30% increase on half of your normal expenses, that is like absolutely devastating. It's crazy to think that businesses like you are able to survive when things like that are happening without just bumping up your prices 30% or more, because I guarantee you it's not the last price increase that you guys are going to see, and you know that full well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that it's at the business level, it seems a lot easier to raise prices, but between a business and a private individual, a consumer, that's where it is the hardest, and it's going to be a really tough problem in the coming years too, because I don't see it stopping. So I don't know how to deal with that emotionally or mentally. It's really kind of messing with me, to be honest.
Well, and we've had our own price increases ourselves, so it starts to beg questions of do we change the business model? Do we, change prices, things like that? And ultimately, that's what, entrepreneurship, I like to think of it as an analogy for life, because there's nothing you can do about a 30% price increase. What are you going to go start a business that is creating refrigerators? Obviously not, because that's going to cost way more than just taking that 30% price increase. So, looking back on your guys' journey as entrepreneurs and opening this place, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but did it change how you live your personal lives dramatically as well?
I think it's made me so conscious of where we choose to spend our money. And the other thing, I think that it's where we choose to spend our time, and even the balance of work and life over the years.
Absolutely.
So it definitely causes you to be much more introspective, because when you're making choices as an individual, it's easier to think, oh, this is going to affect me and like maybe this small circle around me. When you're making them as a business, you realize it has a much larger impact, which then to me makes you reflect back personally again. Like, just because I'm only impacting myself or my small community doesn't mean I should be any less like passionate about why I'm doing what I'm doing and have intentionality and integrity and all those things. So,
well, and so these pillars of your guys' values, intentionality, being better every single day, that's what led you to open up, different stores across Arizona and into other states as well. So what has that journey been like, kind of expanding into other states? Talk to me about some of your new locations, if you would.
Yeah, our most recent location is in the Coronado neighborhood in Phoenix, on 7th Street, just south of Oak, north of McDowell. And that one was really fun because it was a cool old building, old house actually. We got to come in there and kind of, I wouldn't say strip it down, but there was a lot of unnecessary things in there, and we could just kind of clean it up and simplify the space so that it was a little easier on the eyes, if you will. So it just felt really good to do that and feel like we're really improving, a historic space. Versus this space we're sitting in is much more industrial, warehousey. It's kind of meant to look like this, right? Mm-hmm. Intense and busy and lots of stuff going on and that. But, we really wanted this peaceful neighborhood, like you feel like you're sitting in the living room drinking your coffee. That was kind of the intent there. So that's our most recent one. That one was really fun. We have a great staff there.
And they're also starting music on Friday nights, live
really?
music. And
very cool.
We have a food truck out there on Fridays too. So we really want to be engaged in the community there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I actually given the staff the props there. Just such a cool, diverse group of people, like so interesting artists, community members, people that left professional jobs to come and do coffee because they loved it. I mean, they're all kinds of people. And so that's been really great. And I think, the store that we opened before that was a really challenging one because it was sort of a test. We opened a store up at Tatum and Shea in the old Starbucks there. And we thought, man, here's what I believe to be an underserved community for specialty coffee. And it was really challenging because it's just a challenging area. It's a different clientele than we're used to. We thought it would be a lot easier to sort of come in and start selling our version of coffee. Mm-hmm. And that's been tough. And, just with the sort of like retail strip mall sort of mindset, we opened that store like 3 months before COVID, which didn't help. So that idea of like shopping in a strip mall kind of like didn't happen for 2 years. And so that one was really tough. But we also realized with that store that we really have two primary marketing sort of strategies with our locations. One in the airport and this Tempe location are kind of, I would say, the quintessential sort of like models for each one of those marketing strategies individually. So this Tempe location, for instance, it's completely neighborhoody. There's a good amount of density, but so many people walk here, ride their bikes here, hang out here. They use it as a home away from home or an office away from the office or an office away from home, etc. And it's just very much community driven, people who live right here. And then there's the airport location where we've got people from all over the country walking through there every day, and not just people who are, sort of like hip specialty coffee people like from Portland or San Francisco, but also people who live in, Des Moines, Iowa, and, Chicago, suburbs of Chicago. So we've got a really great sort of diversity of travelers there. So we kind of have this very neighborhood strategy, and then a very much more of a traveler, sort of like once in a while customer strategy, if you will. So we've got a couple at hotels. We've got 3 locations at hotels, one in Palm Springs, which is a little of both actually, but because the hotel's pretty small, but we get a good number of neighborhood people there.
Okay, nice.
So that's one that kind of converges on both, but a lot of people are like, who we meet from LA, they're like, oh, I've been to your place in Palm Springs. And I'm like, weird, it doesn't feel like it would be the first Cartel Roasting Co experience that they might have, but it's Palm Springs. And then, in Austin, we have one. And then we actually have one here in Central Phoenix also, all 3 in the Arrives/Rise Hotel here in Phoenix. So, really understanding that strategy has really helped us sort of understand who we believe our ideal customers are in these types of locations, but then allow us to really build our business based on those ideals and those strategies, because people who are coming and actually really like our product but are going back home and maybe there's no Cartel there, we want to be able to invite them to engage in our social media, because even if they live in Des Moines, we want them to be able to be involved in the community at least a little bit, And
I figure they can buy a bag online. And
absolutely,
have it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, creating that experience that we wanted to create when we first opened this place to a customer in Des Moines through a website has probably been our biggest challenge, but also a really fun one to solve. So we're kind of in the works of like really figuring the nitty gritty of some of that stuff out right now, which is really fun. I never ever imagined I'd be sitting in my office thinking, how do I sell coffee with our values to a person across the U.S. who's been to one of our shops one time by accident, you know?
Yeah, and that's a new area
Fun
that
challenge.
we've been exploring lately is the marketplace. So we're fortunate to have our whole bean coffee for a while in the Whole Foods around Arizona, and then also now in Southern California and Hawaii.
Oh, really?
That's just the cans, by the way.
Oh, so the whole beans in
Whole beans
Arizona,
only here,
and then
yep.
our canned cold brew is Southern California and Hawaii. So that's surreal.
Nevada,
also
Las Vegas.
To have people send you pictures of
your product. Yeah. Well, so this is, a pretty deep question here. So you could probably do a whole episode on what I'm about to ask. But when you realize, okay, we have a few different sets of customers, how do we cater to these different sets specifically? What does that process look like of identifying, these demographics and these specific customers? And how are you, in the actual execution of it, figuring out how you can better serve these customers? Because it sounds very, very abstract, very, if you haven't done it before several times as entrepreneurs, then it's like, where do you even begin with that? Just sit down and ask everyone. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I wish I could answer that question, but we're literally doing that right now. So hopefully in a couple years, I would like to think it happens sooner, but it might not. But that's really been our focus lately is we're selling product in Southern California, but are we really serving those customers? Because selling product isn't just our goal. It's nice
selling it with your values.
We do. We want to create that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that really fascinating sort of connection that people have with brands and with products. And
but it is really cool to have a vehicle like cold brew coffee that we have figured out how to brew really well in large batches, and now we can our own cold brew coffee. So it's like we have a big first part of that step of having the quality product that can be transported on a refrigerated truck to these places.
Sure.
But I think the part that we're
processing
is how to make it mean something.
Yeah,
because that
absolutely.
is important to us.
And it is like we're still like trying to figure out the best logistics just for getting those products there, right? Through distributors, or how do we get our how do we get canned cold brew to our own store in Austin, Texas? How do you do that? It's not as simple as you think, and it's definitely not cheap. I think at the end of the day, when we sell cold brew in Austin, we probably lose money on it. But, we want to create this unique custom experience, and we believe we can do it in those retail locations a lot better than we can in the marketplace today. But that's exactly what our focus has been. In fact, we're employing an agency to help us create that exact thing with the purchasers at these grocery environments, that will then allow us to touch those customers better. Does that make sense? So it's not only complex, you have to add steps in between, and all of these. There's a lot of complexity to getting to that customer and saying, how can I serve you? Like you said, ask them.
But between you and the customer, there's a whole bunch of rules of engagement that you have to learn.
Absolutely. Well, and it's an interesting thing because you can put in all that work and have all these logistics and systems built out, and it's a little bit more complex, of course, than I'm about to describe it. But maybe if you change one thing on your label and add a little bit more information, then now that experience resonates with people so much more. You see it with trying to think of an example here, but like Tom's shoes, right? Painting the pictures of their values, and people latch onto that. And it's like, how do you take your love of people that was so central into the building of this whole thing that you have going on here, and how do you articulate that to someone in Texas that's buying your coffee? And I think that's extremely difficult, and that's like basically what entrepreneurship becomes once you hit a certain scale, right? Not surviving, but really connecting with people.
Yeah, I think probably the first step in that direction that just kind of resonated in my mind is we came up with this idea through our marketing efforts here: make good things, make things good, right? And it's this idea of this cyclical idea of we love making good things, but it's really important for us to make things good also. And to say, that could mean so many different things. Is the good coffee making my morning better? Or is it allowing me to take 15 minutes and just sit on the couch and drink my coffee and have a meditative moment where I can just clear my mind? Like that 15 minutes in the morning was a big part of why we wanted to open our retail location. And this bar that we're sitting at used to be right here, and it was right next to the barista. And one of my favorite things to do was to come in and stand at that bar and drink my morning coffee every day, my cappuccino, for 10 minutes and talk to whoever was there. And it was so many people. I met a business partner at that bar. I met some of our strongest, longest term employees at that bar. I met some of my most favorite fun baristas that happened to be working for us at that bar.
We also met a fellow business owner who told us about the book Traction at that bar.
Yep. I mean, it is crazy when you think about the amount of things that happened right there on that floor 10 feet away. We used to bring our baby in and lay him on the bar and drink the cappuccinos and just make sure he didn't roll off. I mean, he was basically raised here. So I mean, there's just so many memories of that. And then that idea of making things good really resonated with, I think, our personalities as people. And so that to me is that banner of, why not enjoy the little things in life? Make good things like coffee, food, art, just writing a letter to somebody who needs a pick-me-up, or a kind word here or there, or just smiling at somebody at the grocery store. I mean, what does that mean? Make a good thing. And then making things good, that cyclical idea of enjoying those things that you've made or that others have made for you, and just like taking a moment to appreciate the depth of a very simple thing like a smile at a grocery store, right?
Well, that really resonates with me because on a personal level, that's how I kind of like to start my morning, right? Is a glass of coffee, and I don't like to just jump straight into work, and I like to kind of wake up and maybe take an hour to just kind of soak things in, kind of reflect where I'm at. A little almost meditation, even if I'm not sitting there and, putting like a guided meditation on or whatever it may be, just the act of kind of sitting with a cup of coffee, which I enjoy consuming, and just kind of being conscious about the day in front of me, the days behind me, and what's going on. The people around me really is a huge part of it as well. To hear that is something that has been a focal point of your business, sometimes in an intuitive fashion, sometimes in a very direct fashion. Intuitive in the sense that, you had your kid growing up on this bar. To me, that's like what I imagine when I end up having a kid. I'm going to be probably drinking a cup of coffee in the morning and having my kid there and having the same experience that you guys did. And the fact that you've created this environment and a similar environment at your many other locations, that people can come in and have their own version of that, where they're doing some work and maybe they just found out they got a promotion, or maybe, they're really struggling and they're tired, and your cup of coffee pushes them through to have that, little boost that gets them through and gets the work that they need to have done. That to me, it almost seems like that's where you guys are at right now, is how do you take that experience and put that in a cup of cold brew that you're then sending out to Texas, and not just maintaining the quality, but, having that deep-rooted experience with the coffee itself.
To prompt that reflective time. Or
sure.
We did try to put some fun copy on the can to, remind us all to be a little bit whimsical and fun.
And take that few minutes. But one thing I do want to point out, you've mentioned you guys a few times, or us, but the reality is today, actually, our leadership team and our management level leaders are the ones doing those things. It's actually something that we don't have as much impact on a daily basis now, but what we do have impact on, which has actually been a really refreshing place for me to be, and I know for my wife Amy also, is our focus today as business owners is almost entirely on making a great place to work, having a great business that does great things, and by great things I mean really lives for its community and for its employees. We will never ever make a decision of choosing a profit over an employee. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be people first, and our employee is the most important customer of this business today. Our customers are the second most important customer of our business today, and then the shareholders, they're the last. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean they are not the focus. We're going to do what's right for those people, in that order, in order to preserve the legacy of what we believe this business could become, from the standpoint of caring for people and creating that impact. When we started this company and we said we want to build this community, we thought we were building a community of customers, and we were, and we did. Mm-hmm. But the last few years, the most recent phase and the ongoing phase for us now will be, we're building a community of employees.
Sure.
And that we want to do right by them no matter what, and that we are going to do our best to serve them as best as we can, because they are the backbone and the heartbeat and the creativity. Absolutely. And the passion and the love and the quality of everything that we do here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the cool part about that is ultimately they can turn around and be a light in their communities, even once they leave this place of work. Hopefully when they're here, it's not like tearing them down. It's like building them up, and then they can go out into the world. And
yeah, I was remembering the other day after I graduated from college working at a...
The other day?
I remembered the other day.
It's like, you forgot a few years.
Jeez. I know how old I am. Thank you. I remembered the other day when I had first gotten out of college, standing at a register taking orders for sandwiches at a sandwich shop. And I remember how much I hated that job. And it was literally because all I did was stand there and push buttons on a register, take money, smile, have a 8-second pleasant conversation, and then it was another person. And it was so tiring and frustrating, and I was making minimum wage. I don't think we even got tips. And I just remember thinking, if this is what work is, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. And I realized that, I think in that moment something happened to me, and I realized how crappy jobs can be. And there was nothing inherently wrong with the job. It just was annoying and boring and frustrating. Mm-hmm. And so our goal is to create a place where if people leave here feeling energized and refreshed because they enjoy their jobs and it's fun, even if it is work and it's hard sometimes, then we've changed the world for the better in so many different ways, because the idea of somebody leaving work and being energized is so exciting to me.
Absolutely. Well, and that's an interesting point too, because I asked, how is it that you serve these customers? And you mentioned that, your staff are your most important customer base. And, to look at the grand scheme of what you guys have gone through, right? When you first started out, you had those values that weren't necessarily written down, but you were communicating them to people. And I asked the question, how do you take that entire experience that you guys personally had and put that in, a can of cold brew or in a cup of coffee? And I think in large part that comes from the culture, right? If you have a team of, 100 people or whatever your staff may be, and they all share that same drive and care as you guys, well, then you get that trickle-down effect or even a trickle-up effect of ideas coming from staff members of how to provide a service that hits those core values more. And that's where you get that positive feedback loop that, helps small businesses kind of transcend from that surviving phase to a thriving phase. And it's really, really exciting to see you guys going through that, because like I said earlier, when I first came in here, this whole area was seats to be filled rather. And now maybe there's not seats there, but those seats were sacrificed to be able to provide this experience to even more and more people. And if you can do that in a way where you're maybe dialing back in a certain area to grow in another area, if your values are guiding those decisions, and are following those actions, I think we might have just figured out how you identify and serve your customers, right? And I think you guys have been doing that for a while now.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you guys so much for sitting down. If there's anything else that you'd like to share with people, stuff coming up, please do. Now would be a perfect time.
Well, we have we are launching our first app.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So that's a big thing we've been working on behind the scenes for a while. So Labor Day weekend.
6 months exactly.
Yeah. Labor Day weekend, it's coming out. Also, we're launching a new happy hour, so we'll have a cold brew margarita.
Really?
And an espresso mojito. So that first weekend that the app opens, if you order it on the app, you can get it free in the store.
And what else is going to be on the app? Is it predominantly ordering?
Yes. Order ahead.
Well,
ease of use, remembering what you usually get if you're still groggy in the morning and aren't ready to
just a
have
couple
your
of buttons and your
conversation.
coffee will be ready.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before putting some interesting copy on a can to kind of continue pushing your message. My vote for the app that you're developing, which obviously this is, set a little bit tongue-in-cheek because putting anything into an app is no small hurdle to do, but I hope at some point you're able to implement a way of kind of pushing some of that same messaging to people through the app. Maybe it's when they place an order, just reminding them what you guys have going on and why you're doing it. Because for me, if I have that kind of message and I'm starting my day with a cup of coffee and go into that meditative, experience, that to me is something that I would really connect with. So that's my vote for a future addition to the app.
Feedback.
Yeah, that's nice.
Well, once again, thank you guys so much. I know you're busy people, so sacrificing time, we really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners do as well, and I can't wait to finish up this cold brew and come in again sometime soon for some more.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yep. Cheers.